What it is, what it was, what it shall be, what it won't be, what it can't be, what it never will be. What? This is the Yay or Nay Show with Alex C. This is the sports show for sports fans by a sports fan. Okay, a lot of things to go over today. Today we're going to talk about a few things. The state of the Phoenix Suns. Chris Paul, yesterday I told you I was regurgitating in my mouth because there were a lot of things being said about Chris Paul by some national guys, and it was completely off the hook in regards to what I was hearing. I definitely got a dispute with some of the things that were being said, and I definitely want to go over it and clear up the air in regards to what I believe Chris Paul is and what Chris Paul is not. Also, NBA results. Not really worried about that right now. As we know, the Suns won their series. I picked them in the Alex C. I was right, C. I was wrong. So once again, another series that I won. A couple of series still up in the air, tied 2-2. You got the Clippers series. You got the Sixers series. And, of course, tonight you got the game with the Brooklyn Nets and the Milwaukee Bucks. Of course, the Nets are operating shorthanded without two of the threes as far as the big three are concerned. So, it's one of those things where a lot of conversations are being had. A big one about KD today I was hearing, and we're going to get into that tomorrow. I almost threw that in for today, but I'm going to save the KD conversation for tomorrow in regards to what tonight's game means for his legacy. It really isn't going to matter whether the Nets win or lose tonight. It's not going to change the conversation in regards to what I have to say in regards to KD and his legacy in this particular series and what other people have said. Plus, I still have some other people that I want to talk to in regards to KD. So before I get into that one, I definitely want to make sure that, I get some more people, some more points of views. That way tomorrow when I come at you, we can have a real conversation in regards to what tonight's game is going to mean for Kevin Durant. I did get a couple of yay or nay questions to come back, so I want to read the results to a couple of those questions right now. One of them is, do you think less of NBA players who create super teams? Now, this goes back to Charles Barkley and what he said yesterday. He made some comments in regards to super teams. He wasn't rooting for them. And I talk to a lot of people, again, as I do rideshare, in certain circles that I have and I've had formed for a really long time. And I've had a lot of people tell me that they don't respect teams that move to super teams to play. This kind of leads into the conversation that we're probably going to have about Kevin Durant tomorrow. So I don't want to go too deep into that. But nonetheless, the question again is, do you think less of NBA players who create super teams? And 83% of the people polled said yes, they do think less of players who go and create this super team. So that kind of makes me wonder, well, then this is probably the second or the third poll that I could think of that I've done recently where I've asked about super teams and whether people like them, agree with them. And now this one talking about the players who go and form them. So it makes me wonder, really, how popular is LeBron James anymore? What is his legacy going to be 10 to 15 years from now? Not at the moment, not 5 years ago, but what is LeBron James' legacy going to be 10 to 15 years from now? I'm kind of curious to see the answer to that question. All right, another one of the polls that came back. Should the NBA get rid of the salary cap like baseball? Baseball does not have a salary cap. Should the NBA get rid of the salary cap and just let players make as much money as possible? Now, that, along with getting rid of the individual salary cap, is what a lot of people have said would actually help get rid of these super teams. Because think about it. Do you think an NBA superstar is going to give up money if it means that he has to let another player come in and command a whole bunch of money, but yet it's going to take money out of his pocket? Probably not. I would have to agree with a lot of people who've said that it probably would be a great way to get rid of these super teams. And then you'd have more of a balanced system where you have, like, say, one star on a team, and then it's see how many other role players you can get that actually know how to play their actual positions, like the days when you had Larry Bird in the Celtics, Julius Erving in the Sixers, right? You had Magic Johnson, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and the LA Lakers. I mean, the list goes on, but you didn't have super teams. You maybe had one. Sometimes you had two stars, but everybody else was a position player, played the position well. The most well-coached team, along with, of course, the best position players, would end up being the ones competing in the playoffs and then going for the NBA title. And it was a lot more balanced back then. in my opinion. And I think a lot of people would agree with me when I say that. But again, there's no such thing as a universal answer. Just because I believe that doesn't mean I expect everybody in the sports universe to believe that as well. But it is what I believe, and I think a lot of people do agree with me. I would imagine if I took a poll on that, the majority of people would rather see that than see these super teams, especially since these polls that keep coming back consistently say they're not in favor of the super teams. They don't necessarily have the most respect for the players who create these super teams. So again, just looking at it from that perspective tells me that the NBA definitely in the offseason needs to make some changes. And there's a lot of changes I think the NBA needs to make. Not that there's anything wrong with the NBA. It's not unwatchable or anything like that. I'm not saying anything along that lines at all. I'm just saying there's a lot of changes the NBA needs to make in order to make the games more competitive, more fair, and more watchable. Again, not that they're not watchable. They're very watchable, very fun to watch, but they could be made a lot better with some simple rule changes. And some of it is just really, really seriously common sense. We will definitely be having that conversation in future podcasts. Make no mistake about that. Okay, now, again, one of the things I want to talk about today was the state of the Phoenix Suns, Devin Booker, Chris Paul. The reason why I'm bringing up Devin Booker is this. So yesterday I heard a national guy. The national guy was talking about, Chris Paul. He is the second best guard in NBA history. Wherever he goes, he creates a culture. He takes them and makes them winners. And they are just the best team in the world when you add Chris Paul. Okay. And again, I talked about this a little bit a few shows ago. I'm going to reiterate some of the things I talked about a few shows ago. And then we're going to move forward with some of the comments that I want to make specifically in response to this national syndicated host who made these comments about Chris Paul, other than Magic Johnson being the second best point guard in NBA history. Okay, so let's look at the Phoenix Suns. Let's start there. 8-0 the bubble last year without Chris Paul. Let me say that one more time. 8-0 in the bubble last year without Chris Paul. No Chris Paul. Had the current coach, had the current cast of supporting players for the most part. No Chris Paul. 8-0. So they were already figuring it out as a team. They were already figuring out the new system with the new coach last year, previously to the arrival of Chris Paul. I cannot stress that enough. I don't know how this host forgets that very, very, very important point. Then you got to look at it as Chris Paul comes in. Okay, great. Host says everywhere he's went, he's made it great, made it better. All veterans that have played with Chris Paul don't like Chris Paul. Anybody who knows what happened when Chris Paul played with the Clippers know that Chris Paul got ran out of town. Why did Chris Paul get ran out of town? He didn't just get run out of playing with the Clippers. He got ran out of Houston with the Rockets as well. Both for the same reason. He can't play well with others. If he could push people around and be the bully and be the big guy, the one that everybody listens to, Chris Paul's all in. He'll stay with it because it's his team. It's his culture. As long as people do what Chris Paul says, Chris Paul's okay. But when you got a bunch of other guys who were equal or, in most instances, better than Chris Paul on the team, he doesn't seem to do well with that. He doesn't like having people on the team who are better or think they're equal. And again, in most of these instances, the players that I'm referring to were better. Rockets played with a guy named James Harden. He did an interview. You guys can look it up on Google. You'll see Chris Paul talking about after he got done playing with the Rockets. I don't talk to James Harden anymore. Why doesn't he talk to James Harden anymore? Because he couldn't get along with James Harden. You guys don't see a problem with that? There's a reason why Chris Paul has to keep leaving one team and go to the next team, which this same nationally syndicated host keeps referring to other players all the time, making fun of them. Even made comments about Kevin Durant today, talking about how they have to keep leaving one team to go play with another team and how they're the reason why they have to leave. They're their own worst enemy. Yet Chris Paul, he gives him a pass. But Chris Paul is his own worst enemy. Chris Paul can't get along with anybody he plays with. The only reason why Chris Paul is getting along with anybody on the Suns is because they're all young, so they don't have big egos yet. They haven't accomplished anything yet. So if they don't have big egos and they haven't accomplished anything yet, they've got no reason to fight back with Chris Paul. But if those guys really took a look in the mirror, and I'm sure maybe some of them have, they figure it out. They were 8-0 in the bubble without Chris Paul. They were on their way to doing well this season without Chris Paul. I would say that without a doubt, in my mind, the Suns would be in the same position that they're at today without Chris Paul. All they need is a competent point guard. That's all Devin Booker ever needed, was a competent point guard, so that Devin would be freed up to go out and get the spots to take his shots. So he wouldn't be the guy with the ball that everybody was concentrating on when they were coming down the court. He needed a point guard that could run the offense, and all Devin had to do was be open, pick and roll, get open, find his spot, pop, drop, go back on defense, play ball. That's all Devin Booker needed. That's all the Suns needed. They've been searching for a long time to get a true point guard. They failed at doing it because the owner doesn't pay the money. The owner had to be convinced in order to pay the money to get Chris Paul this season, by the way. There's a story that was being talked about yesterday. They had to convince Sarver to get Chris Paul, and it took some convincing to do it because he doesn't want to pay the money for players, which is why I am more convinced than ever that Chris Paul's not going to be a Phoenix Suns next year. But that's we can get into that here in a few minutes, but the bottom line is he had to be convinced to get Chris Paul. But again, the Suns would be who the Suns are this year without Chris Paul. I'm a Suns fan. I'm glad to have Chris Paul. Where I'm confused, though, is, again, I'm more of a realist. I don't want to hear these guys talking about Chris Paul like he's the reason why the Suns are winning and why the Suns are who the Suns are. The Suns would be who the Suns are without Chris Paul. All the other cast of characters on the team now would be as successful as they are now without Chris Paul. Have you ever heard of a guy named Devin Booker? There's the true heartbeat of the team. It's not Chris Paul. It's Devin Booker. Devin Booker's the one putting up the points. It's not Chris Paul. Chris Paul is a role player. Chris Paul is a guy who has a role to play. Chris Paul's not the guy who comes in and scores the winning bucket. Chris Paul's not the guy you want to have the ball in his hands when the game's on the line. You want that in Devin Booker's hands, not Chris Paul's hands. Chris Paul's not the guy you want to take the money shot when everything's on the line. That's Devin Booker, not Chris Paul. So how can you give all the credit to Chris Paul when Devin Booker's the guy? He's younger. A lot of you people don't know of Devin Booker because you're on the East Coast or Midwest and you don't pay attention what happens here in Arizona or on the West Coast because the games happen too late for you, and I understand that part. And apparently, so the story goes, a lot of people don't pay attention to SportsCenter when the highlights go on, even though Devin Booker is the Phoenix Suns highlights, not Chris Paul. But with that being said, Devin Booker is what makes this team go, not Chris Paul. If Chris Paul were injured and got knocked out of the playoffs now, it wouldn't matter. The Phoenix Suns will go as far as Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton and the rest of the cast of characters. And notice how I said, and the rest of the cast of characters would take them because they play 5-ball. 5 players, 5 touches. Everybody moves the ball around. Everybody distributes. Everybody contributes. That's the type of ball that the Suns play. They don't play Chris Paul ball. It isn't about get Chris Paul the ball and Chris Paul's going to be the one that manifests points and gets you to the promised land. Chris Paul isn't that player because let's go over what National Guy said. Second best point guard in NBA history, according to this syndicated national host, who throws a lot of philosophies out there, by the way, that don't fly in the sports world. Let's be realistic. This guy's wrong more often than not. Comes up with some creative stuff sometimes, but he's wrong more often than not. But nonetheless, he's got a couple of things that he believes that make Chris Paul the number 2 guard because he's talking about stats. Okay, great. So points per game, how he performs. Okay, regular season. Best winning percentage in the regular season, more so than Kobe, more so than any other point guard in the NBA, more so than Michael Jordan. He's got a better winning possession. The best winning percentage in NBA history in the regular season. Great. Stats, winning percentage in the regular season. Okay. How does that work for you in the playoffs? Let's See what Chris Paul has in the playoffs. Michael Jordan, NBA titles. Kobe Bryant, NBA titles. Chris Paul, no titles. So I'm confused. So being the best in the regular season makes you the best in history as a point guard. Do you know how foolish that sounds? That doesn't make any sense at all. So being the best in the regular season somehow makes you the best of all time. But these guys that you're saying he's better than have titles. Chris Paul, 0. Michael Jordan, titles. LeBron James, titles. Kobe Bryant, titles. Guess who doesn't have titles? Chris Paul. Guess who won't have a title this year? Chris Paul. Why? Because Chris Paul is not the guy to win you an NBA title. Everywhere he's went, they've gotten to the playoffs. Chris Paul has done what? Been injured. So wait, this same national guy makes fun of Harden because Harden supposedly is unreliable in the playoffs because he gets injured. Chris Paul has been everywhere, gotten injured in the playoffs. This same guy, again, gives Chris Paul a pass. It's amazing how that happens. James Harden, he picks on, says he's unreliable. Chris Paul, because he likes him for whatever the reason is, maybe they're personal friends or something, I don't know. But he gives Chris Paul a pass for being unreliable and injured in the playoffs all the time. Now, this year, allegedly, he's playing better and he's healthy. Okay, and I'll go along with that. He's playing a little better. He's a little healthier. He still got injured, but he's playing a little better. He's still in. He's still playing. Okay. How many games has Chris Paul won the Suns? I would say this many right here. 0. Chris Paul hasn't won the Suns any games in the playoffs. Devin Booker has. Devin Booker's won the games in the first quarter, putting the lights out on the opponents. How about Chris Paul? When did Chris Paul show up in some of those games where the Suns won? When he actually started putting the ball in the basket. Oh, second half after the Suns already had the game in hand. Fourth quarter when the Suns already had the game in hand. Then all of a sudden, oh, Chris Paul comes out. What a great job he did at distributing. Oh, he finished with 20 points. He went in at halftime with 7, comes out with 20, and all of a sudden that makes you a great player. And by the way, the Suns were already winning the game since the late part of the first quarter, and it was already out of hand, and the Suns were already going to win no matter what. And Chris Paul is somehow the hero? I don't know what this guy is watching. I don't know what this guy is thinking when he talks about the Suns, but I'll tell you this, as a Suns fan, somebody who watches the game and pays attention to the team probably a lot more than this guy ever does, he's got it wrong. Chris Paul is not, will not be the reason why the Suns succeed in the playoffs. Has not been the reason why the Suns have had success in the playoffs. The Suns will go as far as Devin Booker will take them. Not Chris Paul, Devin Booker. That's as simple as 1, 2, 3. Chris Paul is a great addition. Again, but the Suns needed a point guard. That point guard could be anybody else as long as they're competent and they don't turn the ball over and they know how to run an offense. Again, anybody other than Chris Paul could do the same thing and the Suns would have the same success. The Suns just had to find a point guard. An actual, real, true point guard. Now, Chris Paul is an actual true point guard. But number 2, you ever heard of a guy named Isaiah Thomas? How about Kobe Bryant? How about Steve Nash? I can go on for days. How about Kevin Johnson? I'm naming point guards that are better than Chris Paul could ever dream of being. And this national guy wants to say that Chris Paul is the second best point guard in NBA history? Dude. That's, again, don't know what you're thinking, don't know what you're watching, but no, not even close. And an analyst that was being interviewed by this said journalist also said the same thing. Chris Paul is not even a top 5. Maybe if he went and won the NBA title this year with the Suns, maybe then this guy would actually put Chris Paul at number 5. Nowhere near number 2, but might put him at number 5. And I would disagree. I wouldn't put Chris Paul there at all. Chris Paul would definitely, maybe, and I'd have to really think about it because I don't have a list. So putting the full disclaimer out there, I don't have a list, but I don't think if I made a list, and maybe someday I will, but I don't think if I made a list, Chris Paul would even be in my top 20 for point guards in NBA history. There's too many point guards, too many guys that did it well. The definition by this nationally syndicated guy for a point guard is somebody who takes and elevates the other players around him and makes them better. Now, let's think about that for a moment. Elevates the other players around him and makes them better. How can Chris Paul be elevating anybody when he doesn't get along with anybody? DeAndre Jordan, did he get along with them? No. Hardaway, did he get along with them? No. Blake Griffin, did he get along with them? No. There's a reason why Chris Paul has to keep searching for a new home. He keeps getting bounced out of the teams that he plays for because he doesn't get along with people. Even in an interview that he gave yesterday, I didn't like his attitude in regards to what he said when he said, well, this is who I am, and if you like it, great, and if you don't, great. And you're going to tell me that that is an attitude that players want to play with? You're going to tell me that that is an attitude that is universal, that an organization wants to surround themselves with? No. That attitude right there is the reason why Chris Paul keeps getting bounced out of all of the places that he plays at, because he has a bad attitude. The guy's not a team player. He's a me player. It's all about me, 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 me. Look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me. What are you doing talking about DeAndre Jordan and Blake Griffin? How dare you talk about them? It's about me. I'm the best player on the team. It's not about James Harden. It's about me, Chris Paul. I'm the best player on the team. It's about me, 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 me. Give me the ball. Give me the ball. I need the ball more. I need to be the one having the ball. Don't give it to James Harden. Give it to me. I'm the best player on the team. I should be the one running point. I should be the one with the ball in the hands when the game's on the line. Chris Paul's attitude is the reason why he's been bounced out of every organization he's played for. And again, continuing on the me, 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 me attitude that Chris Paul has, there's a reason why he's not going to be playing with the Suns next year, because the me, 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 me attitude is trying to get a contract that he doesn't deserve. A 3-year, $150 million contract? Dude, you're 36 years old. You're going to be 39, still looking to make $50 million a year? You're not as good as Joel Embiid. You're not as good as Ben Simmons. And Ben Simmons is getting $32 million a year. And he's way better than Chris Paul. And he's way better than Chris Paul will ever be. So there's a lot of holes in Ben Simmons' game, but he's a lot better than Chris Paul. And he's a lot better than Chris Paul will ever be. And he's getting $32 million a year. And people are even questioning, and rightfully so, whether Ben Simmons should be getting $32 million a year. So if we're questioning why Ben Simmons is getting $32 million because of all the holes in his game, and there are holes in Chris Paul's game, why would we be looking to give Chris Paul $50 million a year on a 3-year guaranteed deal? That doesn't make sense. So again, Chris Paul and the me, 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 me attitude is going to be, again, looking for another team, because Chris Paul is all about Chris Paul. He's not about his team. He's not about his teammates. So that comment that this national host made where Chris Paul elevates everybody around him and makes them all, no. Chris Paul is all about Chris Paul. That's it. I haven't seen anything otherwise. Simple as 1, 2, 3. All right, now, moving over to baseball. There's been a lot of controversy about Spider Tack, right? You guys have all heard about Spider Tack. Everybody's talking about is using a foreign substance bad for baseball. Spider Tack is currently what pitchers are using. It's become a big thing. A lot of people are discussing it. And now today there was a, I guess, ruling that came down from Major League Baseball corporate offices where they said any pitcher that's caught using Spider Tack will get a 10-day suspension with pay. Now, originally I thought probably the first thing that you're thinking, if this is the first you're hearing of this, which is, how is suspending somebody with pay a big deal? But after looking at it, reading some stuff, listening to some people, it actually makes a little bit of sense, because like I was talking to a guy who I was driving a little earlier in rideshare, and he's like, look, the reason why you suspend somebody, but even though they're still going to get paid, is because, number one, they're going to be able to hurt the team by not allowing the pitcher to pitch, right? If you got a great pitcher who's having a great year and he's having a bunch of no-nos, or he's got a low ERA or whatever the case may be, now he can't pitch for 2 games because they pitch every 5 days, right? So that's basically a 2-game suspension. So if you got a pitcher who, even though he's still going to get paid, he's not going to be able to pitch for 2 games, that hurts the team. So now that puts a little pressure on the team in order to make sure that these pitchers aren't using the Spider Tack. And then, of course, they're also going to increase the amount of times that these guys go through a mandatory inspection to make sure that they're not using the foreign substance. So that technically could be a good thing. It could also be a bad thing by slowing up the game a little bit, but nonetheless, it could be a good thing. It's designed to be done in between the innings, so hopefully it doesn't slow the games down. But again, that could be a good thing, checking these pitchers during the game in intervals to make sure that they're not using the spider tech, right? So I guess it makes sense in regards to what this guy's saying. It's a good thing for them to suspend these players with pay because, again, it still hurts the team and it puts a lot of pressure on the team in order to make sure that the teams are on top of their pitchers to make sure they're not using any foreign substances. So I understand that philosophy. Another thing that this person said in yay for these people getting in trouble and getting suspended with pay is because, again, it's easier to get it passed, right? You don't have to worry about, a big fit and a big fight from players. If they're getting suspended with pay, it's a lot easier for them to swallow getting suspended when they're still getting paid versus getting somebody to understand why they're going to get suspended but not get paid. In other words, they're going to fight for their money. But if they're getting suspended and yet they're still getting their money, they're not necessarily going to put up a fight. It's easier to get it to go through. It's easier to get the players to agree with it. So therefore, you can get it installed as a rule and move forward. And ever since they've gotten on this spider tack thing and started really inspecting pitchers and so on and so forth, it's been said that already batting averages are up by, a half a percentage. So maybe there's something to it. Maybe there's more pitchers that were using this stuff than we all realize. Because, again, I know in the original accusation, I believe there was only 2 or 3 players that were being discussed in regards to being the ones who were using this on a regular basis. But when you have batting averages across the league going up by 0.5%, not bad, right? Somebody going from a 342, I'm just using that as a number, or a 242, being more realistic, a 242 to a 247 batting average, not bad, right? That's not bad. And that shows you that problem's a little more widespread than what they thought. If you have it universally where all the players' batting averages are going up and all the no-nos, kind of explains that a little bit, right? Everybody was worried about all the no-nos, wondering where they were coming from, how was it happening. Now it kind of makes sense how all these no-nos were happening if you had all these pitchers that were using the spider tech. So again, they're going to install this rule, make it a lot more difficult for people to cheat. And for the guys who were all in favor of this on the EA side, they're saying, this is why they do it, again, because it's easier to pass and it makes it more competitive because now the pitchers don't have an advantage. And plus they believe that baseball was getting boring with all the no-nos anyways. And now the batting averages are going up, home runs are being hit again, baseball's getting exciting again. So all the people that are on the yay side of this are giving those as the reasons why they're on the yay side of this. Now, on the nay side of this, and there are quite a few people who are on the nay side of this, they say this. And they don't just talk about spider tack. They're also talking about, and this is going to be one of the poll questions that I'm going to put up on the Twitter page at Yay or Nay Podcast. They're also talking about steroids. And here's where I'm going with this. So on the nay side, for the people who are not in favor of baseball cracking down on the pitchers that are using foreign substances, you have naysayers saying, look, it shouldn't matter whether a pitcher does or doesn't use this in order to have a better grip on the ball or allow them to have a different velocity or whatever the case may be. It shouldn't matter because everybody's on the same playing field, meaning all pitchers can use it. All batters should be aware that it's happening, and all batters, knowing that it's happening and considering it's what they do for a living, should have the ability to be able to plan accordingly to be able to combat it. So as long as everybody's aware of it and all pitchers have this substance available to use, then batters should just be practicing harder, trying to figuring it out, how to get hits on these pitchers, even though they got this substance that they're using. And batters should be allowed to combat this by, and again, this is what some people are saying, using steroids. Because baseball was the most fun to watch when you had all these guys on steroids and you had all these home runs being hit on a nightly basis. Sammy Sosa, Mark McGwire. You guys remember all that, right? You guys remember all those home runs. You guys remember what was happening during that time frame when, again, the story goes, steroids were rampant. So these guys are like, look, if the pitchers can use a spider tack and everybody is aware of it and they know it's happening, batters have to figure out how to combat it. So one of the ways batters can combat it is by what? using steroids. They used steroids in the past. Everybody was aware of it for a long time. It took a long time for somebody to finally come out and out all these players who were using steroids. So why not have the pitchers use the spider tack, players who want to use the steroids? Otherwise, if you're a player who doesn't want to use the steroids, then figure out how to be able to hit the ball, even though the pitchers are going to be doing this. And now baseball might become even more exciting because you're not going to know what product you're going to get on night to night. On one night, you might get a no-hitter. On another night, you might get a plethora of home runs. You don't really know what you're going to get. But it'll make it to where you're enhancing people's ability to be able to perform better. And as long as they're aware of the risks, if there are any, and of course with steroids there are, and they continue to use it anyway, and they make it known that they're using, and everybody's aware of what's happening, why not let them do it? Just like why not let the pitchers use foreign substances if it makes them pitch better? As long as everybody's aware of it and they don't do it and try and lie about it, why not let them do it? And let players use what players that want to use for batting. And then everybody's on the level playing field. You got batters that have the ability to be better batters. You got pitchers on the field that have the ability to be better pitchers. And at the end of the day, you might have a better product on the field known as baseball. That's what some of the naysayers are saying in regards to banning foreign substances, whether it be steroids or whether it be spider tack. They're saying, nay, don't ban it. Don't sit there and make players, pitchers in this case, miss games, even though it is with pay, because, again, you're hurting the product on the field known as baseball. So they don't agree with it. They're against it. You got guys who are for it. Again, the guys that are for it are saying, hey, why not? As long as everybody knows that the rule's in existence and they know that they're going to get inspected by umpires during the game. It puts a lot of pressure on the teams to make sure that the pitchers are not using the substance so they don't get suspended for 2 games. Because, again, the last thing you want to do, especially as a manager of a baseball team, is be missing your best pitchers on the field. Because, let's be honest, pitchers are like quarterbacks. They mean everything to the team. They mean absolutely everything to the team. Just like a quarterback touches the ball on every single snap, a pitcher touches the ball on every single pitch. So they matter just as much as a quarterback matters. You don't want them missing from the games, and you don't want fans to be missing those guys from the games either. So make it aware and known that these are the rules. This is what needs to be followed. If it doesn't happen, you're going to get suspended. So that is the yay or nay of using foreign substances, and is it bad for baseball? We did a poll on this, I believe, a few days back, and if I remember correctly, I should have looked it up, but if I remember correctly, the poll came back. More people said that using foreign substances to pitch is bad for baseball. So, again, for the people who are nay on this one, saying why not let people use foreign substances, why not let batters use steroids? Obviously, it sounds to me like they're the minority of the crowd at this point in time. But again, I did do a poll a few days back, and it came back. Most of the people in that particular poll said that using a foreign substance to pitch in baseball is definitely a bad thing for baseball. Now, staying with baseball just a little bit, the state of the Arizona Diamondbacks. That is a conversation that I definitely want to have. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to have it today because I'm about to run over on time. So we will talk about the state of the Arizona Diamondbacks specifically tomorrow, as well as get into Kevin Durant and some of the comments that were made today. Don't forget, a bunch of questions up on our Twitter page at Yay or Nay Podcast, the address to the Twitter page, a bunch of new stories up on our Facebook page, as well as a copy of the Twitchy video of the podcast. They're up there. This is now episode number 3 of Twitchy. I'll have that up on the Facebook page as well. And again, the address to the Facebook page at Yay or Nay Podcast. You guys have a great day. Enjoy tonight's game with the Nets and the Bucks, and I will talk to you tomorrow.